Welcome to Tales with Tunes. In a sun-dappled clearing, Reynard the fox stretched luxuriously on a bed of soft moss. His belly was full from a morning of mischief, and a contented sigh escaped his lips. Reynard, known throughout the forest for his cunning ways, was always plotting his next adventure. Suddenly, a flash of white caught his eye. It was Penelope the stork, her long legs gracefully carrying her across the meadow. Reynard, with a sly grin, hatched an idea. "Penelope, my dear friend," he called out, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Such a pleasure to see you on this fine day." Penelope stopped, surprised by the fox's sudden friendliness. "Reynard," she said cautiously, "what brings you to greet me?" "Why," Reynard exclaimed, feigning sincerity, "I was just thinking how delightful it would be to share a meal together. I've prepared a feast fit for a king, or rather, a stork." Penelope knew Reynard's reputation. "A feast, you say? Are you sure that wouldn't be too much trouble?" Reynard waved a dismissive paw. "Trouble? Nonsense! Consider it an honor to have a creature of your stature grace my humble den." Penelope hesitated. She wasn't entirely convinced of Reynard's sincerity, but his invitation was tempting. "Well," she finally said, "perhaps a small bite wouldn't hurt." Reynard's grin widened. His plan was working perfectly. Penelope followed Reynard, her long legs keeping pace with the fox's nimble steps, a flicker of doubt lingering in her heart. They arrived at Reynard's den, a cozy burrow nestled beneath the roots of a towering oak. Inside, a delicious aroma filled the air, making Penelope's stomach rumble. Reynard gestured proudly towards a low table, its surface laden with an enticing spread. Wide, shallow dishes held a thin layer of broth, dotted with enticing morsels of meat and vegetables. Penelope's beak, perfectly designed for spearing fish from deep waters, found itself useless against this flat obstacle. "Dig in, my friend," said Reynard, slurping loudly as he lapped up the broth with his flat tongue. Penelope dipped her beak into the dish, but the food lay just out of reach. Frustration welled up inside her. "Reynard," she said, her voice strained, "this dish seems rather unconventional. Perhaps a deeper bowl would be more appropriate?" Reynard chuckled, a sound that grated on Penelope's nerves. "My dear Penelope, it's all part of the experience. A special shallow dish to savor every delightful drop." He continued to lap up the broth with exaggerated enjoyment. Penelope, famished and frustrated, resorted to licking the edges of the dish, barely managing a taste of the delicious meal. Shamefaced, Reynard realized there was a certain irony in his guest's predicament. He had intended a cruel joke, but a nagging feeling of unease began to gnaw at him. As Penelope politely excused herself, claiming a sudden headache, Reynard knew his plan had backfired. Penelope may have been outfoxed this time, but a sly glint remained in her eye. Little did Reynard suspect, the tables were about to turn, days turned into weeks, and the memory of the disastrous dinner lingered in both Reynard and Penelope's minds. Reynard, feeling a pang of guilt, which was quite unusual for him, decided to avoid Penelope for a while. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. One sunny afternoon, as Reynard was napping under his favorite sunbeam, a long shadow fell across him. He opened one eye to see Penelope standing regally before him. "Reynard," she said, her voice surprisingly mild, "I trust you are well?" Reynard scrambled to his feet, a mix of surprise and apprehension flickering across his face. "Penelope! Such a surprise! To what do I owe the pleasure?" Penelope smiled, a hint of mischief dancing in her eyes. "The pleasure, Reynard, is all mine. I'd like to return the favor and extend an invitation to a delightful dinner at my humble abode." Reynard's ears twitched. A dinner at Penelope's? This couldn't be good. "Your abode?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "But Penelope, storks don't exactly have dining tables." Penelope chuckled. "Oh, we have our ways, Reynard. Come, don't be shy. I promise a most satisfying meal." A seed of doubt was planted in Reynard's mind. Was this genuine hospitality, or was Penelope plotting revenge? Curiosity, however, got the better of him. With a forced smile, he agreed to join her. Reynard followed Penelope with a cautious heart. They arrived at a tall, sturdy oak tree, its branches reaching high into the sky. Penelope stretched her long neck, gracefully scaling the rough bark with powerful strides. Reynard, not as nimble on vertical surfaces, scrambled up with some difficulty. Reaching a wide, flat platform built amongst the branches, Reynard's apprehension turned to astonishment. A beautiful spread awaited him, unlike anything he had ever seen. Long, elegant vases, fashioned from smooth river stones, held a clear, cool liquid that shimmered in the sunlight. Delicately balanced on the edges of the vases were plump, juicy worms, wriggling enticingly. "Welcome, Reynard," Penelope said with a warm smile. "Please, do help yourself." Reynard, his mouth watering, approached a vase. He tried to lap up the water like he had at his own disastrous dinner, but the narrow opening made it impossible. He lunged for a worm, but it tumbled into the water, just out of reach. Frustration bubbled up inside him. This was exactly the situation he had put Penelope in. He could see the amusement twinkling in her eyes. "Penelope," he sputtered, this is ridiculous. How am I supposed to eat?" Penelope dipped her long beak gracefully into the vase, swallowing a worm whole. "Why, Reynard," she said with a gentle laugh, "it seems you haven't quite mastered the art of dining from a stork's perspective." Shamefaced, Reynard realized the true meaning of Penelope's invitation. It wasn't revenge, but a clever way to show him the folly of his own trickery. He spent the rest of the evening feeling rather foolish, unable to partake in the delicious feast. As the sun began to set, Penelope walked him back to the base of the tree. "Thank you for the interesting dinner, Penelope," Reynard mumbled, feeling a newfound respect for the stork. Penelope smiled. "Perhaps next time, Reynard, we can find a meal that suits us both." With that, she took flight, leaving Reynard with a rumbling stomach and a valuable lesson learned. He had underestimated Penelope, and in doing so, experienced a taste of his own medicine. From that day on, Reynard thought twice before playing tricks on his friends, realizing that true friendship wasn't built on competition but on mutual respect and understanding.